I'm Emily Chang in New York. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, more questions swirl around Tesla after a bizarre earnings call. CEO Elon Musk is now reportedly putting contractors on notice and sparring with Warren Buffett. Plus, the state of streaming. Consumers are spending billions on music services, bringing the industry back to life. How the rivalry between Spotify, Apple, and more is set to play out, and who's getting paid. And the U.S. midterm elections kick into high gear as 4 key states hold primaries. Are tech companies prepared to take down fake news and misinformation, or will we see a repeat of 2016? First, to our top story, Elon Musk has reportedly locked out all contractors who can't find a current Tesla employee to vouch for the quality of their work. A recent email obtained by the website Electric was sent out to Tesla employees warning that all outside workers worldwide would be denied access to Tesla factories. Part of the email read, quote, "By default, anyone who does not have a Tesla employee putting their reputation on the line for them will be denied access to our facilities and networks on Monday morning. This applies worldwide. Time to scrub off the barnacles." This comes just days after a bizarre earnings call when Musk cut off, quote, boring Wall Street analysts asking, quote, bonehead questions about the company's cash burn. Joining us now with more, who else but Bloomberg Businessweek's Matt Shafton, who covers Tesla. So what is this now, Survivor?
You know, it's, as Elon Musk has said, it's production hell at the Tesla factory. They are scrambling to make these Model 3 sedans as quickly as they can, and it seems like perhaps the stress of the moment is beginning to show.
He's referred to workers as barnacles before, but isn't the goal to produce more cars, not less?
Well, there was a memo that leaked a couple of weeks ago where Elon Musk basically said that Tesla was spending too much money and that they needed to find ways to reduce costs, that there had been sort of I think he called it a Russian nesting doll, so another fun metaphor for this. But the idea being that Tesla was relying on these outside contractors, basically acting too much like a normal car company. So he in that memo said he was going to ask everyone to justify their use of contractors. Now we have this memo where he's basically saying you have to personally vouch for these people.
Is this because the contractors aren't living up or something? You know, is it because of the production problems?
Well, we don't really know. I mean, the fact is there have been production problems. Tesla has been spending a lot of money. So I guess you could read into that and say that's what's going on. On the other hand, it's sort of surprising if you're trying to make as many cars as possible that you'd want to cut staff at this moment. So it's kind of a head scratcher.
Now, investors are still talking about this bizarre earnings call. So to refresh our memory, let's take a listen to what his exchanges included with analysts.
We're going to go to YouTube. Sorry. These questions are so dry. They're killing me. I mean, we're talking about a 3 to 5% difference. Yeah. So, like, you know, and it's something that we'll solve like within a 3 to 6 months later. So, like, it's not like it's like some, you know, don't make a federal case out of it. Next. Boring bonehead questions are not cool. Next, I think that if people are concerned about volatility, they should definitely not buy our stock. I am not here to convince you to buy our stock. Do not buy it if volatility is scary. There you go.
So I'm also wondering, are you guys going to let Porsche beat you to market with a 350 kilowatt-hour supercharger? Because I know you've mentioned, E3.
We'll keep going. Questions are not boring.
Now, when you heard Elon at the top of the call saying we're going to YouTube, he's talking about going to a 25-year-old host of a millennial-focused channel called HyperChangeTV, who ended up getting in 23 minutes of Q&A with Musk. Take a listen.
So I set up a campaign and I had about a couple hundred of my viewers email into Tesla's IR team representing over 20 million worth of shares to get a voice for retail investors on the conference call. And so I sort of crowdsourced a bunch of questions for my viewers and subscribers and then pitched it to Elon and Tesla, and they let me on the call.
Do you think the model's been disrupted by what you achieved? I mean, 23 minutes, that's a lot of time. And he obviously was quite dismissive of many of the traditional Wall Street analyst questions. And many of those questions were valid, talking about gross margins. Does it need to raise more money? But do you think this is a pivotal moment in the analyst call epoch?
Yeah, I do think it's a pivotal moment, and I kind of disagree. I think the questions right before me were reiterating a lot of things that had been answered in the shareholder letter, and so I think it was just a perfect storm of Elon getting a little frustrated. I don't think the transition went as smoothly as it could, but then I had 10 to 12 questions prepared from all of the shareholders who I solicited feedback and information from, so then I just had the floor and decided to keep asking questions that were providing value.
Yeah, I mean, I've got so much to ask you. So you've got this YouTube channel. The channel's not making money, and I gather you've sold some of your Bitcoin investment to fund the channel. I mean, can I ask you how much of Bitcoin you owned, or what price you bought, or what price you've sold? Do you have any other cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, so I got into Bitcoin around 500 or 600 and liquidated an average of about 12,000. And so I've been using those profits to fund HyperChange while we ramp revenue for now. And currently I do own one other crypto asset, which is Maker, which is the governance token behind a stable coin.
Fascinating. Can we just get back to the Tesla call for a moment, because I'm wondering why you particularly wanted on the earnings call. I mean, if you're talking on behalf of shareholders, couldn't you have waited for a shareholder day or an annual, meeting, which is where shareholders' voices are heard? The earnings call typically is for analysts.
Yeah, I mean, I think of myself as sort of an analyst as well. And although shareholders do get a question to ask, or do get the chance to ask questions at the shareholder meeting, the quarterly conference calls are also for updates on the business in the sort of 12 to 18 month time frame, additionally going into the financials. I will say I could have dived more into the financials, specifically the trajectory of operating expenses, because I think that's really important about them going to profitability. But I do think there is a place for these more strategic questions on the conference call, and the analysts just weren't addressing them. Things like the feedback from the huge energy storage project in Australia, which Elon Musk then referenced. They're working on a gigawatt-hour scale project because of that success.
Did you feel at all used by Elon Musk in the sense that he was able to give you 25 minutes, which then sort of took away some time that analysts could have been asking him questions with?
No, I think it was a win-win. I think we really evolved the Tesla story, and I think there's been a ton of news that you're seeing coming out, about the Tesla network, about the Tesla Semi, about Tesla Energy, that is really evolving the long-term story out of those questions.
Galileo Russell there, the host of HyperChange Television. And to be fair, Max, he did ask a lot of questions that many people would love to ask Elon about the technology and the future of Tesla that don't often get asked on these earnings calls. That said, this is a company that hasn't turned a profit in its 15-year history, so analysts are right to wonder if and when that might happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the sort of concern when you saw the stock price fall in the wake of this call wasn't so much about having a YouTube personality, a sort of fanboyish analyst on the call. It was more about the reaction and the sort of seemingly erratic demeanor of Elon Musk. You have a company that is totally dependent on this one person, and that's why people are paying attention to his kind of eccentricities so closely.
Meantime, even Warren Buffett is talking about Elon and his behavior at the shareholders meeting over the weekend, the Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting. He was asked about this. He said, Elon may turn things upside down in some areas. I don't think he'd want to take us on in candy. Of course, Berkshire Hathaway owns See's Candy. And of course, Elon had to tweet about this. In fact, there were several tweets about candy. He said, I'm starting a candy company. It's going to be amazing. And by the way, he's super serious about it.
Yeah, he really couldn't resist taking that candy bait. Elon had, I think, dissed the concept of moats, which is a Warren Buffett thing. And so they went back and forth. And again, this is...
And by the way, a moat is putting a competitive buffer around your business.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk said they're lame or boring. I can't remember the exact word, but uncool is the bottom line. And his point of view is really that innovation, rather than building these, kind of these barriers to entry is where things are. And I think he does have a point there. Again, on the other hand, there's kind of a focus question going on here.
Well, and the big question is, look, this is a guy that is lionized around the world. People are very excited about him building the future, but is this kind of behavior going to have a long-term impact on his reputation and the willingness for investors to back him up?
I mean, I think you have to take the good with the bad with him, because he's really good at making news and creating a scene. And part of what Tesla's been able to do so successfully is get people to put money down for these cars. And part of the way you do that is by making noise. It's by trolling Warren Buffett or bringing this, sort of YouTube personalities on the call. And so I think you kind of have to take it both ways. And, the stock is recovering today. So I don't know. We'll have to see what the numbers show in the end.
All right, Max Trafficant of Bloomberg Business Week. Great to have you. Great to see you in person. Thank you so much. Coming up, streaming success. How the music industry is riding the streaming waves to success it hasn't seen in over a decade. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. The music industry is experiencing a boom in revenue, one not seen in a decade. Revenue hit $8.72 billion in 2017, a jump of more than 16% the year before. And that number has been steadily rising since 2015. The last time the music industry was getting numbers like that, 1994, when growth was around 20% to the tune of $12 billion. And analysts are pointing the finger at streaming as the savior of this industry. In fact, Goldman Sachs is predicting that streaming music will grow into a $34 billion industry by 2030 and that the vast majority of that will be paid from subscribers. Joining us now from Boston to discuss, Paul Verna, analyst at eMarketer. So, Paul, it wasn't that long ago that Taylor Swift was pulling out of Spotify. She's, of course, back. But what's happened in the last couple of years to make streaming work better for the industry itself?
Well, what's happened is the streaming services have ramped up and people have really latched on to that model. Up until a couple of years ago, there was still a tension between CD sales and streaming and paid downloads. And on the streaming side, you had services like Pandora that did more playlist-based streaming, and then you had on-demand streaming like Apple and Spotify. And now I think that on-demand model has really taken over. So people basically choose what they want to listen to, and they have access to a lot of these services. They're affordable. They offer pretty much everything under the sun with very, very few exceptions. And people are good to go.
Now, we recently spoke with Kerry Trainor, the CEO of SoundCloud, you know, one of the smaller streaming services. Take a listen to what he had to say about this sort of explosion in growth.
Spotify, I think, is a fantastic development ultimately for the streaming space. You know, we're in a moment now, which I think many of us may not have envisioned even a couple years ago, where we're on path to having hundreds of millions of consumers paying for streaming music. And when you see that kind of return to growth in the industry overall, you know, it's an exciting development for really all parts of the chain.
Still, Paul, revenue peaked in 1999, but, you know, Goldman Sachs is predicting it's going to get to $41 billion by 2030. How? Is it all powered by subscriptions?
Well, just to be clear, the Goldman Sachs figures are for global business, and we've been talking about U.S. business. But nevertheless, the U.S. being the biggest market and the driver for the industry, I think that, yes, streaming does have the potential to continue to grow the overall pie. Eddie Q from Apple estimated that the total market, the potential market of paid streaming customers is about 2 billion people around the world, and only about 100 million, so 5%, are currently being served by either Apple or Spotify.
We also recently spoke with Steve Boom, Vice President at Amazon Music. Take a listen to what he had to say about how Alexa is compelling this transformation.
We're seeing exponential growth. You know, we don't disclose our numbers publicly, but what I can say is in a very short period of time, Amazon Music has become the third largest streaming service globally. And, you know, just some figures, fun figures, we've seen just this year alone in 2018, listening on Alexa in the last 2 months is more than 2x what it was the year before, which was also more than 2x what it was the year before. We've actually reached a point where listening on Alexa on Amazon Music is bigger than listening on smartphones on Amazon Music, which makes us really, really different than every other music service where it's almost all about mobile.
So, Paul, the pie is expanding. How do you see the pie being divided up between Apple and Spotify and others like Amazon Music?
Well, first of all, I agree with the comments from Amazon about Alexa and about home speaker technology. We're going to see that also with Google, because they obviously have a similar technology. Apple has Siri. So the ability for people at home to tell their smart speakers to play a playlist or a radio station is going to power a lot of listening at home, and obviously the mobile side of it has already taken off with with services on smartphones and people using Spotify and Apple and Pandora when they're working out or when they're driving. So that really just extends it into the home in the same way that connected TV extends video into the home, but people also watch on smartphones.
All right, well, something obviously we're going to continue to follow. Paul Verna of eMarketer, thank you so much for joining. I do want to talk now about how one company in particular is using technology to upend the music industry. Cobalt Music is part record label, part publishing business, part digital tech platform, and it is using all of that to try and put the power of the music industry back into the hands of performers. It's been since around 2000, and just hit revenues of $321 million while featuring some of the biggest artists around today. Cobalt counts the likes of Carly Rae Jepsen, Ariana Grande, Beck, Zayn, and more in its stable. Joining us now, Willard Aldritz, the CEO and founder of Cobalt. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm curious what's the feeling is among artists. You know, I mentioned Taylor Swift earlier, and how there was a lot of discontent about how streaming services exploded their business. Yes. How are artists feeling now?
So I remember that particular moment that people were quite upset, but the artists and writers on our platform did see that 30% of the revenue at that time already came from streaming. So Cobalt has transformed the music industry by us using technology and putting the power into their hands.
Talk to us about how Cobalt does that.
So historically it was a local regional system, and 75–80% disappeared in cost and middlemans. We have put in a central organization with a global platform. So we go straight to Spotify in Stockholm, or straight to Apple in Cupertino or San Bruno, or the big place in the world. And we put it all together in London. Is our global platform. We speak 34 languages, and our creators can put up the smartphone and see in real time what's going on in the world with all the data and revenue demographics.
Now, I understand you have a coding background, yet you're also a musician. You play the saxophone, and so I'm curious what that understanding brings to the table.
So I think that being a musician from the beginning, and I could code, it was, and I experienced the music industry from both ends. I realized that when I saw the transformation to digital happening, it was absolutely clear for me that I wanted to achieve two things: to take the music industry into the digital age. One hit today has 10 billion microtransactions. You need a technology platform to do that. Number two, I wanted to serve creators. So that means we don't take people's rights. We are here to be a service provider, and we give you 100% transparency. Historically, you always need to litigate to get your data or get through those, I would say, bullies in the whole system to it. And when we're coming to awards today, we are getting hugs from all our creators.
What are the challenges ahead for the streaming industry? What could sort of upend or disrupt this, increasing growth that is predicted but not assured?
So I'm been so excited since I saw Spotify opening in Stockholm 2009. We had 90% piracy. 90% piracy, and the traditional record labels were going to close down. We supported them from day one because we really believed in the transformation. And what was at that time the I would say not belief in that this is going to save the industry. We were very convinced. The challenges is that continue to support all the platforms that like to sell our music, and then also the money feeding back to the artists. That is a challenge.
So let's say 5 years from now.
Yes.
What is the pie going to look like?
I love it. I think it's going to be a beautiful environment. 5 years from now, I believe we're going to have 1 billion people on the smartphones. Remember, we had 90% piracy in emerging markets too, in Asia, in China, etc. 1 billion on the platform. The artists and creators can see what's going on. You as a fan will have, we are going to create 20 times more artists who can live on their commercial living. So by increasing the pie, we significantly lower the costs on the global scale. It's centralized in technology. That means so much more money goes down to the creators, so much more bands can play the music and have a living on it. For example, there was a jazz musician who had $2,000, who just had a girl and said, well, I need to stop playing. He came to our platform. His first statement was $30,000. And he said, well, I can continue. Think about all those people, entrepreneurs and creators and struggling. And now we're giving them that data, that money, and you and I will be beneficiaries. And actually, the big tech companies today are really supporting us.
Let's talk about the big tech companies. I spoke to Apple CEO Tim Cook last week and asked about Spotify specifically, given that, you know, while there are these other players, it's very much a two-horse race right now between Apple Music and Spotify. And he said, I don't think about it that way. I think about all the potential for all to get all the people out there who aren't subscribed yet to a streaming music service, and that is the opportunity. And then he also talked about the edge, though, being exclusive content. So exclusive content that's on Apple Music, exclusive content. Obviously, Spotify has its own exclusive content. Is that going to be the differentiator? What will be?
So first of all, the potential, if you think about it, 2 billion people, we believe, can afford to pay for music. There's 175 today.
But is it a commodity if really all that matters is what songs
for
you
you
have?
It's not a commodity, but in comparison to film and TV, I don't personally believe in exclusive content because you like to consume so different things in comparison to film and television. You want 30 million songs on your band, so you're.
But then does it matter if it's Apple or Spotify or whoever else?
The difference is that you all like different interfaces, how you prefer. I also believe that voice interaction will come in, so I think that's important.
All right, Willard Aldritz, Cobalt Music CEO, learned a lot today. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
Okay, coming up, billionaires bash Bitcoin. 2 of the richest men in the world speak out about the world's largest cryptocurrency, and it's not pretty. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Two of the richest people in the world are showing no love to Bitcoin. Bill Gates told CNBC that he would short the cryptocurrency if there was an easy way to do it. He added that Bitcoin is, quote, an asset class. You're not producing anything. It's a reversal for Gates, who called Bitcoin exciting just 4 years ago. And the other titan weighing in, none other than Warren Buffett, saying the largest cryptocurrency in the world is, quote, probably rat poison squared. Buffett is echoing the words of his business partner, Charles Munger, who in 2014 also compared Bitcoin to rat poison. Coming up, old players and content new to over-the-top programming, why Condé Nast is heading into the streaming space and what it could mean for cable companies next. And later, as we get closer to the U.S. midterms, are tech companies prepared to stop the spread of misinformation? We will discuss. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in New York. The NewFronts, an annual presentation to digital advertisers, has come to an end here on the East Coast. The Interactive Advertising Bureau plans a second week of presentations later this year in LA, which is a first. This year's event was much more refined than in years past, but one theme that continued to appear is cord cutting. Programmers are ready for those over-the-top offers. Joining us now, Andre Swanston, TrueOptic CEO, a company that's built the only audience measurement and data management platform that works across the entire OTT ecosystem, including connected TV. Also with us, Bloomberg's entertainment reporter Lucas Shaw, who's normally based in the heart of Hollywood. Both attended multiple NewFront presentations. So, Andre, I want to start with you because you see so many changing trends across the engagement landscape. You know, what is new? How are audiences reacting? And what do they want to watch?
Yeah, I think the thing that's been the most interesting over the last 24 months is really the continued fragmentation of over-the-top and connected TV. So 2 or 3 years ago, Roku had really all the dominant market share in terms of people streaming, in terms of devices, and then providers like Hulu had the lion's share of the audience for ad-supported. And now what you're seeing with the TV Everywhere apps from all of the traditional cable and broadcast companies, as well as traditional digital players like Condé Nast, you're seeing much more competition for the streaming audience.
So, Lucas, how did that play out at the NewFronts in terms of how presentations were, essentially presented?
Yeah, it means that people are more focused on the shows, I think, and less on the trends. There's sort of an acceptance that cord cutting has happened, and audiences and advertisers want to be online, and it's really who can provide the best content to pair with. So Disney will bring out Mickey Mouse, show a teaser of Wreck-It Ralph 2. YouTube will talk about its original shows and all the stars on its platform, and on down the line, Twitter announced something like 30 or 40 different partnerships on Monday. And so it's who can convince the advertisers that whatever they're selling, we have this kind of phrase of too much TV and traditional TV.
Right, it's the golden age of TV, and yet there's also a question, are we in a TV bubble? There are so many shows, and I don't know who has time to watch them all.
I don't.
Exactly. Well, so is the definition of a hit changing then? Do you need to have as big of an audience, or is the audience itself becoming more fragmented when you consider each show and not just the platform it's being watched on?
Yeah, so more and more advertising is going to audience-based advertising. So traditionally it was, I hope that my audience likes a certain type of show, so I'll just look for that type of show and assume based off some sort of Nielsen rating that the audience is live. I think across over-the-top and connected TV, there's more of an expectation of actually knowing the audience, not just only the age and gender, but also, do they drive a luxury vehicle? Are they in market for international travel? And so the content is really becoming a proxy to go out and get that audience. So if you have a very coveted audience, you don't have to have a large amount of viewers to be able to really monetize that content.
Are you seeing anything, given the extra data that you have, that conflicts with what we see with the Nielsen rating?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, there's a ton of evidence that what correlates well on linear television often is not the most popular content on connected TV. I think partly that has to do with the on-demand nature. People can watch whatever they want, whenever they want to watch it, as opposed to still the bulk of linear television is watched live. There seems to be more of an affinity to more episodic, longer content on OTT than even on linear. And so, yes, a strategy has to be very focused on the screen that people watch it on, because the behavior is not always the same across different platforms.
So, Lucas, how is this changing the kinds of deals that are getting done and how they're getting done?
Well, the kinds of deals are different just in that everybody wants to own all of their shows. So it used to be that in TV, if you were a big producer, you would sell a show and keep what's called back end, and you could make millions of dollars when that show gets syndicated and reruns and so on and so forth. A company like Netflix now buys out all those rights at the beginning. So you get kind of an estimated back end, but you don't have that crazy upside if you're a TV producer that you used to. And now most people are trying to copy that, because it used to be that studios would sell to other networks. And over time we've seen, not just online, but in traditional TV networks too, people selling to themselves and wanting to control from beginning to end, because it allows them to do what they want online or better compete with Netflix.
So what does it mean for advertising and advertisers?
So I think the opportunity for advertisers is actually better than it's ever been. There's more screens and more opportunity to reach audiences than ever before. I think, though, it does mean that advertisers need to be smart. I think one of the things that the industry needs to be very careful of, and I say this in a nice way, is to not dumb down connected TV into kind of the old TV standards. And
I do see something sometimes, and I'm like, who's watching this? Who's the audience?
Yeah, and I think it's really being able to leverage the data to better have more of a personalized strategy in terms of the content and make things available to the right people, as opposed to just assuming that because this worked 20 years ago on linear television, we'll just keep doing that.
So, Lucas, are people making more money or less?
I think it's concentrated. Netflix is making, a lot of revenue, no profit. YouTube is making a lot of revenue, no profit. All the traditional guys, their revenue is sort of precarious. It's still there, but they're under pressure. I think that if you're a big-time producer, if you're Ryan Murphy, Shonda Rhimes, you're still making a ton of money. If you're a mid-level producer, there are probably more opportunities available to you than ever before. So more shows being made is probably good if you're a creative person. If you're an investor, you got to make the right picks.
And for these, so we were speaking about Hulu earlier, which maybe has less of a lion's share of the pie when it comes to viewing, but they do have this huge hit, A Handmaid's Tale. Are these, networks going to be, is it make or break depending on whether you have a hit or not?
I think Netflix has shown that they have a very different strategy, because a lot of the content, same thing with Handmaid's Tale, a lot of the shows that are winning the awards, the Emmys, aren't actually the most viewed shows on these platforms. So I think that's one thing that we need to be careful of. Sometimes a hit can be a show that wins no awards and a lot of people haven't heard of, but there's 3 million 18 to 25-year-old males out there that will watch it for 7 hours straight.
Almost nobody watched Mad Men. It was really popular in Los Angeles and New York. It won all the critics awards, but it wasn't one of the most watched shows, whereas The Walking Dead, same network, most watched show on TV, but it doesn't win any awards.
Exactly. So I think there's definitely a mix of that. The other thing I would say in terms of how money's being made, it's just not as concentrated. Before it was whoever had the highest Nielsen ratings is making tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. I think because there's so much content and there's so many distribution points, that revenue is actually much more spread out. There's a lot of over-the-top platforms like Pluto TV and Zumo and others that a lot of people have never heard of that have millions and millions and millions of viewers on a daily basis. And so I think that's something that's going to be interesting to watch.
So is this fragmentation sustainable, or will there be consolidation? Will there be M&A?
I mean, we're already seeing consolidation. Disney's trying to buy Fox. Comcast is in there somewhere. CBS and Viacom are probably getting back together. All the traditional guys feel like they need scale because they're trying to compete with the big tech companies. And so you're seeing consolidation there. And most of these digital media companies, I mean, we've had lots of cycles of digital media companies that achieved high valuations. Turns out the business wasn't that great, and either they fail or they get gobbled up or they end up getting pushed together. I think the same will happen with some of the companies that Andre was talking about.
So we asked this earlier when we were talking about music streaming, but in 5 years, where do you see this business? Where do you see the content business?
So I don't even think it's going to take 5 years. I think in the next 30 to 36 months, we won't even call it connected TV or cord cutting or streaming, because it'll be the majority of television consumption will happen that way. I stream Bloomberg all the time, right? So
Thank you.
So it's not just for on-demand content, or it's also live content, sporting news. Everything is kind of shifting to a new distribution pattern, and so I think it's going to just change the entire way we think of television and monetization.
I think it'll still be pretty fragmented, because think 5 years from now, Disney's just going to introduce its own Disney-branded streaming service in 2 years. It'll take, over the next 3 years of its existence, it'll sign up some subscribers, but you're going to have it very balkanized between the direct digital plays, Netflix, Disney's direct-to-consumer, et cetera, and the different bundles that are offered online, because you have people trying to kind of keep their money growing in lots of different ways, given that the traditional model is under threat.
All right, two competing views of the future. I like it. Good for debate. Lucas Shaw, Bloomberg Tech. Andre Swanston, True Optics CEO. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks.
Sticking with television streaming, according to reports, the BBC, Channel 4, and ITV have held discussions about joining forces to create a British streaming service. The early stage talks apparently involve NBC Universal and focus on how the UK's main broadcasters can work together to create a streaming rival to heavyweights Netflix and Amazon. According to broadcasters, Audience Research Board, Netflix has 8.2 million subscribers in the UK and 4.3 million households are signed up for Amazon Prime Video. Coming up, Google is rolling out a new policy around purchasing election ads. But is it enough from Google and other social media platforms to prevent the interference and meddling we saw leading up to 2016 elections? We'll discuss. This is Bloomberg. For some political junkies, this week kicks off the real start to the U.S. midterm elections, with primaries in 4 key states. And a major issue going forward will be whether big tech platforms are up to the task of taking down misinformation and preventing any meddling from political ads. For a refresher, here's what representatives from Google, Facebook, and Twitter had to say about the issue when called to testify before Congress in October of last year.
We have found that foreign actors used fake accounts to place ads on Facebook and Instagram that reached millions of Americans over a 2-year period, and that those ads were used to promote pages which in turn posted more content. People shared these posts, spreading them still further. Many of these ads and posts are inflammatory. Some are downright offensive.
We have uncovered more accounts linked to the Russian-based Internet Research Agency as a result of our review. We also determined that advertising by Russia Today and 7 small accounts was related to the election and violated either the policies that existed at the time or that have since been implemented.
We believe that the relatively limited amount of activity we found as a result of the safeguards that we had in place in advance of the election Google's products also don't lend themselves to the kind of targeting or viral dissemination that these actors seem to prefer. But we are committed to continuing to improve our existing security measures to help prevent that kind of abuse.
Since then, the companies have announced new policies and hired thousands of new workers to flag fake news. But is it enough? For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's national political reporter, Sahil Kapoor, in Washington. And in San Francisco, we've got our Bloomberg Tech executive editor, Tom Giles. So, Sahil, I want to start with you. Obviously, you're speaking with lawmakers all day long. What is their level of concern about meddling going into these midterm elections as these primaries kick off?
There's a high degree of concern, and we know that election meddling is not just something that happened in 2016 and might happen again in 2018. We know that it already is happening to the extent that there are Russian bots and trolls online who are trying to take advantage of divisions in the American political conversation and try to amplify them and excite passions on both sides. They're very good at that. The government has been slow to respond to this, and it's essentially outsourced the task to tech. You played clips of executives from companies like Google, and Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, too, has done this, talking about their platforms being exploited. To them, it's a PR problem. It's not their job, to necessarily worry about election meddling. Their job is to worry about their company, their bottom line, their shareholders. It's the government's job to root out election meddling and hacking and preserve the integrity of this, and they have been slow to do it.
Well, some would argue with that. I mean, they would say that it's Google, Facebook, Twitter's job to try to make sure that these things don't happen. Tom, just today, Google announced it's now requiring all election ad buyers to confirm that they're U.S. citizens or permanent legal residents. Seems kind of obvious. Are the things that they're doing too little too late?
Yeah, well, and Facebook is also going to be incorporating more disclosure so that when you're looking at a political ad, some of the things that the social media companies have never been required to do up until now. There's a whole bunch of disclosures that TV, radio, newspaper have to incorporate when they're running political ads. Social media has not been subject to that, and that's something that, in fact, social media has objected to and tried to keep at bay. But at this point, they realize they really have no choice. So far, they've done very, very little, although that is changing. 2018 as the midterm elections are going to be very much a litmus test of whether Twitter, Facebook, Google are ready for 2020 elections. So far, it's been minimal, and even up until recent weeks, we've done stories and we've shown that, in fact, some of these fake news sites are still very active on Facebook.
And, Mark Zuckerberg was asked about this several times during his testimony, and he, tried to reassure lawmakers over and over again that they're doing as much as possible to make sure it doesn't happen again. Take a listen to what Zuckerberg had to say.
We're going to take a number of measures, from building and deploying new AI tools that take down fake news, to growing our security team to more than 20,000 people, to making it so that we verify every advertiser who's doing political and issue ads, to make sure that that kind of interference that the Russians were able to do in 2016 is going to be much harder for anyone to pull off in the future.
And yet, Sahil, as you said, the meddling is already happening, and you've got U.S. intelligence chief warning that Russians could repeat these attempts. Some states asking for the National Guard to be on the lookout for cyber threats. Are lawmakers doing anything differently this time around, knowing that these threats are more real than ever?
Well, we also have, in addition to what you pointed out, the NSA chief saying that the president has not given a clear administration-wide directive to clamp down on election hacking or meddling, to go after who they believe the culprits were in 2016, the Russian officials, the Russian hackers who were behind this. And Zuckerberg's message to Congress was essentially, trust us, we've got this. I take this seriously, and I'm going to take this more seriously than I have in the past. That's essentially, my summation of what I heard from him. And it's not quite clear to me that Congress is up to the task of regulating Facebook. Those hearings just prove the extent to which lawmakers don't understand technology, how far behind they are, with the dynamics, with the trends in technology, and how far ahead the bad actors and the people who want to meddle in elections are in terms of knowing how to exploit it. So there's a real mismatch there, and it's not clear to me that a government, that this current government, which is run by people who are ideologically predisposed against regulation, is going to necessarily really do something. 2018 is going to be a major test as to, what message the United States sends regarding this, what types of bad actors try to take advantage, how they do, whether they succeed, and what the consequences will be going forward.
This, of course, isn't just an issue in the United States. It's an issue in Europe where presumably, and in a way, it has been taken more seriously. But obviously, European officials very worried about this. Take a listen to this quote from Europe's Commissioner for Justice, Vera Jourova, back in March.
I am not happy at all about this case because, in my view, this is not only about data protection breaches. This is about the threat to democracy and individual freedoms of people.
Now, Tom, Facebook says that it was on the ball with some of these elections that were happening in Europe and that things did work out there, but what are the concerns that are remaining from European officials as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more emphasis on privacy there than there is in the United States, although the culture, the society does seem to be coming around more to that here. Privacy. Does the democratic process go on without hindrance? I mean, those are concerns that they're not just European concerns, that they're concerns that really I think a lot of people here in the U.S. share. You've seen some results. Germany is one that Facebook will point to as, we've really kind of gotten a much better handle on it. I don't think Facebook says that they were able to suss out every instance of fake news, misinformation spreading around. And I don't think anybody's under any illusion that 2018 they're going to get every instance. We're going to see instances of misinformation getting spread around by bots, by these sites, and they're being very creative in getting around the safeguards that Facebook and Twitter create. So I don't think you're going to see all of it rooted out, but I do think that there's some progress being made.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about how or whether big tech is really becoming a lobbying point on the campaign trail. We know, Sahil, that of course President Trump has been very critical of Amazon, but all of these lawmakers are lobbied very heavily by the tech community. Have they been making these tech issues points of discussions in their campaigns?
I don't see much evidence that technology is a major issue in the 2018 elections. I don't see, candidates really vying for that in their primary, saying this is what this is my platform, my opponent is bad on that. It doesn't really crack the top 5 because it's not a pocketbook issue that directly affects voters and and their wallets and their bank accounts and their livelihoods on a day-to-day basis. Now, having said that, there is a strong sense of passion among Democrats, inside the Democratic Party in particular, to do something about this because they feel it personally. They feel like they lost an election because the government, failed to place regulations and allowed, malicious actors to run amok online on platforms like Facebook. And the truth about this is that, Facebook can be criticized, and it has been criticized, significantly for not doing enough about this. But at the end of the day, their responsibility will be to their shareholders and to their bottom line. The government may have to step in to try to do something about this. Whether it does, how it does, what form that takes, all remains to be seen.
All right, Sahil Kapoor for us in Washington and Tom Giles in San Francisco. Thank you both. Coming up, highlights from the Microsoft Build conference, including the company's partnership with Amazon, bringing new voice-controlled personal assistants to market. This is Bloomberg. Microsoft and Amazon may be competing with each other in the cloud, but their Cortana and Alexa are forging a friendship in the world of voice-controlled personal assistants. In a demonstration at Microsoft's Build's Developers Conference, Cortana exec Megan Saunders used Alexa to order milk and then had the assistant wake up Cortana to check her email and send her schedule. This friendship stems from a collaboration announced last August. Finland's Nokia acquired US-based Spacetime Insight for an undisclosed amount. The software startup provides machine learning analytics and Internet of Things apps to transportation, energy, and utility companies like American Water, Eon, and FedEx. Both Nokia and its Swedish rival Ericsson have looked beyond wireless in response to a lull in cellular infrastructure spending. And in tech's latest revolving door, Uber has hired Christopher Hart, the former chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, to advise the company. That same board is investigating the Tempe, Arizona collision that killed a woman as she walked across the street in March. Video of the accident shows the car's driver looking away from the accident and the car colliding with the pedestrian without visibly attempting to stop. Meantime, a report in the tech news publication The Information says Uber's internal investigation determined that its sensors spotted the woman, but error-correcting software meant to avoid unnecessary braking directed the car to continue, the report says. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. On tomorrow's show, we're going to sit down with Chamath Palihapitiya, the founder and CEO of Social Capital. That's all for now. From New York, this is Bloomberg.